We can start. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully, most of you were here last week as well when we had Christine and Graham from the City of Toronto sharing with us the foundation. And that's why I split it into two. I wanted to make sure we cover the basics and also the new updates, because I don't know how many of you know, but it was also council voted, planning and housing voted on some updates. So we had that last week. I will be able to share a link to that recording in case you missed it. But this week, and that's why I split it, I wanted to have kind of the advanced course because, and to be honest with you, I've put these two webinars together because I feel us as industry, in the industry, we see the news and we see the headlines, and I thought to myself, how can the industry do better? And I also want to acknowledge that it's not only on the planners. It's not just the planning to lead the way. And for that, today I invited two of my personal friends, but colleagues that I trust, and these are my two go-to experts in the industry. Zoe Brown from Lura, who is my community engagement go-to, and Samantha Martin from Kaiser and Partners for anything related to communication and how you deliver the story. So today it will be like the three perspectives. Mine, the planning side, it will probably take me a few minutes because, as I said, I don't think it's a lot about the planner or the planning side. It's the deck I will share. When I was creating it, it was really about curating my thoughts around it. And a lot of it, I felt that it's just basic common sense. However, I feel like in some cases we're still missing the basics or the common sense. So I will start a few minutes with the planning aspect, then over to Sam to cover communication and public relations, and we'll conclude with Zoe on community engagement. And what I think is special in that case, and different than any other development, is that there's, as I'm quoting you, Zoe, but there's a human element at the core of when you deal with rental replacement. This is not your typical land development. And I think that is very unique and challenging. So I'll start with some planning thoughts as the person who kind of, as the professional or the consultant that leads the process, but fairly quickly I will give it over to Sam. So again, summarizing my thoughts around this. So basically, wait. Are we able to do that? Let's see. Okay, so sorry, I haven't introduced myself, but if we've never met before or not last week, I'm an architect and urban planner with Smart Density. And I was thinking, I started by saying, what do I see that goes wrong? So, I'll just click all the points, but it's basically ignoring tenants until you have to do something about it. Pure communication materials. And I always say how I'm shocked how many problems in life, even personally, could be solved with better communication. And if you think about it for a moment, you will agree. Underestimating how much tenants tend to group, organize, talk to counselors and talk to the media, and not having a real real point of contact that tenants could reach out. This person needs to be real, needs to answer in their own name. They have to have a face, not hide behind a corporate logo or like ChatGPT style, my lawyer covered every answer. It needs to be human to human and in plain language. So if you think about it, everything that is process, people, and trust, and how you manage all three on all fronts. And all of it, as I said, very basic common sense. It starts with the day you take ownership. Inform the tenants that, first of all, ownership of the building has changed. That's day one. Don't wait until you need to start telling them about construction or just because the rezoning process forces you to do that. So with that, it's, as I said, reach to tenants early. Have a real person from the tenants that but on both sides. It could be from the tenant side, someone that you hire and engage properly and compensate properly. And these are stakeholders, and I would say the most important stakeholders in the whole process. Something that I'm a big believer in: develop an online presence, document everything, and put everything on the record and available online, not just because you're protecting yourself from a future lawsuit. Maybe a lawyer would tell you the same, but because it creates transparency, and you will be surprised how many of them, if given the opportunity to actually learn and educate themselves and be informed, they will choose that path. So anything that you could do, as if you know me, you know I'm a big believer in videos, because videos give you the opportunity, and you can ask Zoe. In our project, we do the videos together as part of the community engagement, because video is that tool that make it very, very approachable, and there's no two-way conversation when the other side is just eager to speak up, which is a very natural and human reaction. They're able to watch you speak, and it's a very efficient tool, because you can, many people could watch it, and it doesn't take too many resources on your end, that if you think about it, on any pop-ups or open houses, which are very important, but a video as a tool is extremely effective and friendly and approachable. So again, I think that's my last, or maybe one before, is about communication and how communications can solve everything. And that's why Samantha and Zoe are going to talk right after me. But there's one of the things that were debated or recommended at Planning and Housing a month ago were the use of plain language, and there's another third friend of mine, Lisa Orcad, who is the consultant, the city's consultant on using plain language, and the importance of that. So how you speak in a human way, and involve the right people. If you could have community organizations that you can work with directly, and my best recommendation is to hire experts, like consultants. Our industry have really good people that could solve you this problem. And first of all, I'm a big believer in hire the right expert. And when I reached out to Zoe and Sam, I asked them, imagine that a client comes in and say, I need you to build the perfect plan. Budget is unrelated. You have unlimited budget, okay? Just for the game of this presentation, please, go ahead and build me your perfect plan. So with that, I will give it over to Samantha. I'll stop sharing. And feel free also to write your questions, and we'll curate some Q&A at the end. So I'm closing my camera for now. Sam, the stage is yours.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Nama. And hi to everyone joining this morning. I'm just going to share my screen here. Nama, I think you touched on a lot of points that you're going to see in my presentation as well. But saying that, I will jump right in. So I'd like to begin by just sharing a metaphor for you to take away from this presentation, and that's the reputation bank. Reputation Reputation bank is similar to any bank that we have. We have an account, we want to grow our account, we make deposits into the account, and we want it to be in the plus. We want it to be in the green. We want it to continue to grow. When you're thinking of the reputation bank, and you're wanting to grow your reputation, have a positive reputation, when you're thinking of deposits that you're making into that reputation bank, they can be made in the form of good publicity, delivering on promises, building trust, keeping the human element at the root of your project and through your communications. Like any bank account, you're inevitably going to have to make a withdrawal one day. And when it comes to the reputation bank, a withdrawal is in the form of negative publicity, negative actions, a lack of transparency or honesty. And your goal should be to make enough deposits, or continuously make positive deposits into the reputation bank, so that when it comes time that you inevitably have to make a withdrawal, You're not left in the red, and you can withstand and weather storms. So we are going to jump into, as Nama asked, what a fulsome communication strategy should look like. But I just wanted to set up my presentation with this reputation bank. Some of you might be disappointed to learn that you cannot control people's feelings or their reactions to the news of a project, but you can control how you keep them informed and involve them throughout the process. And again, keeping that human element to the at the forefront and in the root of all of your communication strategy and tactics, you are able to build that positive reputation, that positive rapport with the community, and have a communication strategy that protects you from accusations that you haven't communicated or heard the community's feedback and concerns. So you might not be able to change somebody's mind about the project, though hopefully you can in some way, but you are protecting yourself in the sense of you are showing and you have proof of all of the communication and the engagement that you have taken part in from the get-go of a project. Some lists of things that you should want when it comes to your communications and things you do not want. So you should want or should have a communication strategy implemented from the get-go that is rooted in the human element and sensitive to the situation. If you have a project on the go and you think that reaching out to the community, at the the bare minimum kind of checkpoint where you just check it off a list, that is not what you're wanting to do. You need to, before any external communications or that project really kicks off, you need to have a communication strategy planned out that is, leading up to kickoff and then throughout the project or development process. And then when it comes time for the project to come into occupancy again in that transition period. You should want to be transparent and honest throughout the process. Um, Zoe might say something similar, but the community and residents can smell BS from a mile away. You need to be transparent and you want to be very communicative in the process and bring people along for the process. That's how they feel involved, and that's how they feel like you're shedding light on a situation where they might feel like there is darkness or there is uncertainty or question marks around the process. You should want to do better than the industry standard. As Nama said, we all know that there are, checkpoints and milestones, that there is regulations and guidance on for you to meet, but why stop there? You should be, setting a new bar for the industry in what a communication strategy looks like and how communicative you are with the community and residents. For your communication strategy, you should want to collaborate with partners and stakeholders, both internal and external, and have alignment on the strategy. Your entire project team, your team of consultants should be aware of what your communication strategy is and when you're going out to community or when you're going to start media outreach. And then external stakeholders as well. So, maybe before you go to community members, you're communicating with your local government officials in the area, keeping them in the loop of what your communication strategy is and how you plan on communicating within their community. That will build rapport, that will build that transparency with local officials and really serve you in the long run. You should want to communicate authentically and transparently from early on and continue to communicate through the entire process. So again, I'm going to reiterate, there is, I think there's a standard that has been set by the industry where you just check the boxes and you're communicating with the community at the earliest that is required. And then there can be silence or very few checkpoints throughout the project, construction or a lack of communication around key milestones for the project. And then you pick up communication again at the end, or when you're notifying residents that they're going to be able to move back in or when the project might be completed. You want to engage with the community through communications at milestones and checkpoints throughout so that they feel informed and they feel involved. You should never want a community member or resident saying, "Oh, I haven't heard from this team in a while. Wonder what's happening." Because then again, that's where the misinformation comes from, or fear or question marks. You should utilize city resources. We learned a lot about them in the first session of this series. They are there to help you. You can push beyond them, and I think, again, it is important to do that, but they are there for your use. So they're a great tool, and you should be using them. And then a big one is follow through on your commitments because people will hold you accountable. If you send out a newsletter and somebody reaches out to you asking for more information and you say, "We'll get back to you," if you do not follow through on that, they will remember it. And that will lead to skepticism or, a feeling of not being heard or listened to. And then on the you do not want side, again, so something like following through on your commitments would lead to something like misinformation, fear, lack of transparency. That is what you do not want. You do not want community members or residents feeling negative emotions towards this project, more so than they might already have from the news of it. You do not want the majority of residents and or community members against the project. So again, you're not going to be able to control how people feel and their response to something. But if you are not communicating in a strategic way that is authentic, again, with that human element, then you are setting yourself up for the masses, like the larger community and group of residents, to be against your project and have a negative take of the project. So that's, of course, something you want to try to avoid and mitigate from early on. You do not want to damage reputation due to not following through on actions. So that's where people, if people are sharing that, something is happening at their building, this is what their current situation is, you want them to be able to say, "But you know what? The new property owners or the new project team is coming in, they're really communicating with us. Like it is not great, not happy about it, but at least we're being engaged with, at least we're getting updates, we're receiving newsletters, whatever that may be." You do not want to wait until there's an issue to consider a communication strategy or engage in PR support. Whether it's internal or external support from a communications professional, it happens far, far, far too often, especially in our industry, that people wait or organizations wait until there's an issue to bring in PR. You want to have again, internal or external PR support from the get-go who can help mitigate risks, identify potential issues, and have a communications plan in place. You do not want to underestimate the power of the media and social media when it comes to public perception. This is a huge one. People will often say, a negative news piece will come out and they'll say, "Oh, it'll blow over." Those live online forever. It is hard to build up, again, that reputation bank, positive press to help bury the negative news stories. You can have 5 positive news stories about your project, and then a sixth one comes out where the focus is on an angry community member. And that sixth one is what people are going to remember and what people are going to be talking about. That sixth one is what is going to get most of the attention. And then lastly, you do not want someone that isn't a communications expert managing your communication strategy. You would not come to me to check to see if or how a performa might be able to pencil. You would not come to me to look at architectural drawings. Experts are experts in their industries for a reason, or their fields or their expertise for a reason. Please don't leave your architects to be the communications expert on your project or to build out a communication strategy. They can help inform it and they can help build out some of the pieces of the communications toolkit that you are going to need, which we're going to get into in the next slide. But leave the communication strategy and expertise to a communications expert, again, internally or externally. So saying all that, what does that fulsome communication strategy look like? What should it include? You need a timeline with key project milestones identified and communications tactics for each. So you need to look at that slated timeline and say, when it comes to first reaching out to the community. And this is when we're advised to do that. Let's bring it back some time and start earlier and what those communications tactics are going to look like, what methods you're going to reach out to them and how you're going to reach out to them, what your media relations strategy might be. Are you going to have a press release going out? So you should literally have a timeline and build out your communication strategy underneath that timeline. You need to have spokespeople that have been professionally media trained. This is a big one. Just because you've talked to a industry news outlet before and it was a positive news story, you think you have media experience. I can assure you, you don't. Please have a spokesperson or a team of spokespeople, depending on their expertise, that have been professionally media trained. The cost of that will, the ROI will, be forever there. It is an investment that you need to make just as an organization or as a team. It should be something that you are thinking of if you have not done that. Your communication strategy should have should align with community engagement. So Zoe and I, in previous projects before, our organizations or our teams have collaborated, and we have made sure that the communication strategy complements the community engagement strategy. They cannot be siloed. The communications team needs to know what the community engagement team is doing when they're going out to the community. The communications team can help support the community engagement team with communications materials. There needs to be collaboration and constant, again, communication. I'm overusing that word, but it's the topic of what I'm talking about, so it's fine. There needs to be constant communication between community engagement and communications, and they need to walk in step with each other. You need to have a media relations and a social media plan. Are you going to be doing proactive media relations? What does that look like? Who are you going to be targeting? What journalists do you have a relationship with? What journalists do you think will have certain takes on your project? You need to do almost like an analysis of what your media relations strategy should look like and when you implement it. And similarly, Nama talked about an online presence. What is your social media plan? Are there going to be project updates on your corporate social media? Are you going to build out a new social media page that's specific to this project and all of it's going to be there? You need to have a plan in place, again, from the get-go. You need to have a centralized and responsive information resource. So that is whether it is a email address that community members or residents can reach out to with questions, or a phone number, both. Is it through social media? Is it a contact form on your website? You need to have a clear and easy way for people to get in touch if they have questions with the project team. And again, as Nama said, that needs to be a real person who is checking that frequently and is being responsive. That is how you help build rapport. Those are the positive steps that you can take to help make deposits into that reputation bank. Within the communication strategy, you need to have a separate issues and reputation management plan. So if issues come up, if they arise, if there is a crisis, you can literally just look at that plan and there is a step-for-step guide on what to do. It's similar to a health and safety, an office building. If there's a fire alarm, what do you do? So within that issues and reputation management plan, you need to identify sensitive topics and key issues in advance. Sit down with all members of your team, all consultants, and look at all of the potential risks that might arise and have a strategy or a plan on what the communications around those potential risks will be if they arise. And then you're going to craft holding statements for each of those potential issues so that if the time comes, and there always will be inevitably a time where something happens, you don't want it to, but you have to be prepared for it, have those holding statements ready to go. And then you need to have one key spokesperson and one point of contact for the media. You need to know that if an issue arises, this is the person that's going to be managing all of the communications, and this is the person who's going to be available for the media. Your key spokesperson or the person responding to media requests cannot be somebody who is on a golf trip in Florida and can only talk to the media 6 hours from now. That is going to add fuel to the fire. The person that you are choosing to be your spokesperson has to be aware that they are on call, similar to a communications or a PR person, on call at any time. And then within this communication strategy, finally, you want your communications toolkit, which should include all of your key messages, press releases, fact sheets, and an FAQ. Oftentimes people ask what the difference is between a fact sheet and an FAQ. Fact sheet is more of an internal resource that you can share with your internal stakeholders, project partners, consultants, so that everybody is aligned on the project facts and the information that is going to be shared externally. And then an FAQ is the frequently asked questions that will be shared externally with community members, residents, local government officials, etc., the media. So these are key items, again, to have prepared from the get-go, but be aware that you should be updating them as the project moves forward. So your key messages will change as the project moves forward, as it reaches different milestones through the construction process. Your fact sheet might also change, and your FAQ will definitely change. So these are things that need to be updated as the project moves forward. And with that, I'm again going to leave you with the image of the Reputation Bank as something to take away from this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam. I actually have a few questions that I wrote down. I'm sure the audience has as well, so feel free to type it in the Q&A or the chat, whatever is available. I'm also going to post the link from last week. And Zoe, over to you.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks, Sam. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. Okay, so I'm going to follow up with best practices for engagement as it comes to rental replacement. This is really about building trust, ensuring equity, and delivering results. Mentioned earlier, my name is Zoe. I'm from a firm called Lura, which stands for Listen, Understand, Relate, Advance. And it is also our engagement approach and process. And we feel very deeply that we all do want to be heard. And when we invite participation and provide meaningful roles in decision-making processes, we do build stronger community relationships. So why does community engagement matter? Now, community engagement is foundational to successful projects, especially as it pertains to rental housing replacement. And when renters, especially those in low income or subsidized housing, are informed and have input, they're more likely to trust the process. And this builds credibility for the developer and government agencies involved. And engagement also ensures that the development aligns with the community's needs and prevents conflict down the road. Both Nama and Sam talked about the early and onset engagement and communication that is necessary, and this is really key as it pertains to successful and meaningful engagement. So the engagement ensures that the development aligns with the community needs and can prevent conflict, as I said, going down the road. And avoiding engagement can result in legal or ethical missteps and can lead to undermining the entire project overall. So some of the core principles for effective engagement, we heard a lot about transparency already as it pertains to communication, and that is directly tied with engagement as well. These principles that you see on the screen are the backbone of every successful engagement effort. And transparency really means clearly sharing project goals, constraints, and decision-making processes. Consistency involves providing updates at regular intervals, not just during crises. And inclusion is the deliberate effort to reach those most affected. Respect means acknowledging lived experiences and cultural practices, and accountability is the commitment to honor promises and explain outcomes, even when they differ from the community's preferences. So this definitely begins with early engagement and ongoing engagement, and definitely starting before any decisions are finalized. We often hear from clients that we might not be ready to go to the community and to engage because they don't have all the answers. And I can tell you that the engagement isn't about having all of the answers, but it is about starting the conversations early on. This begins before plans are locked in and starts as early as possible to prevent any pushback. It's also an opportunity to uncover community knowledge that can help shape smarter redevelopment as the process continues. Sam talked about the communication strategy and some of those key components being a living document, and engagement should be looked at in the same way. Ongoing communication maintains trust and adjusts to emerging issues. And relying on just one format, such as town halls, doesn't work and can often exclude many voices. So you want to think about how you can combine multiple formats. This can be meetings, surveys, door to door. It could be community barbecues, multilingual flyers, if that pertains to the community that you're engaging in, online feedback tools. Both Sam and Nama mentioned having that online presence, either with social media or a project webpage, can go a long way. And informal conversations at local gathering spots. These methods together really build a robust and inclusive process. Some of the frequent challenges that we see definitely relate to timelines and underestimating timelines or having things change. Timing is everything, and you don't want to wait until people find out through the grapevines, which is why it's essential to go out early. However, things do change, and you want to be consistent with updating any of the materials that you're providing and tailoring messages to the needs of the community. So that can be different stakeholders because they'll have different needs, and you'll want to understand what that is and the impacts that it might have to be more specifically for their own situation. Using clear and plain language around all aspects of the timeline and process and benefits of the project go a very long way. Ensuring that the city is also an active partner in these discussions can also help, just with aligning expectations from the onset. You also want to be able to identify and engage with key partners. There's a variety of ways that you can do this, but most of it starts with the research that you do about the community ahead of implementing an engagement strategy, and then updating that as the project continues. Identifying those key players or partners means more than just a general invitation to the public. Directly impacted renters, especially those in public or income-restricted housing, they should be specifically targeted. Tenants association, advocacy groups, community groups, and leaders, they can all serve as conduits to the broader population as well. But it's also insights that they can provide to you prior to any of the public consultations or public meetings that you might be holding. You should pay special attention to people at high risk of displacement, including seniors, non-English speakers, and people with disabilities, as well as families with young children. You can tailor your outreach to these groups to ensure that they are informed and can participate meaningfully in that might be adapting different tools and techniques to their needs. This next slide highlights a few of the tools and techniques that you might want to use. And there's a variety of things that can be used to structure engagement. The facilitated workshops help to frame complex issues and enable more of a structured dialogue. You can also form tenant advisory groups, which help to ensure that residents are involved in a more longer-term decision-making aspect. Small groups also allow for more in-depth dialogue or deeper engagement with those most affected. CBAs, or the community benefits agreements, are formal agreements between the community and developers to ensure securing commitments on jobs or housing affordability, amenities, or other benefits. These tools all shift the process from informing to empowering communities. You want to use clear and non-technical language and focus on what tenants care about. That could be rent levels, it could be the relocation options, it could be return rights. Some of those will also go to updating your FAQs, and that will all be informed by some of the questions that you get from the community, as well as the communication that you'll provide outwards. This can lead to a multi-layered communication and engagement strategy, whether or not that's written notices, newsletters, the project webpage, in-person meetings, virtual meetings, visual aids as it pertains to some of those timelines or maps that might need to be better communicated. But all of that layered aspect allows you to address misinformation directly through the process with updating those FAQs. You'll also start to figure out what works best for that community throughout the process, which is why I said it was a living document that you want to be able to update as the process continues. So anti-displacement and right to return. This is one of the most feared outcomes of rental replacement redevelopment, and that being that there would be permanent displacement. Engagement must include a clear explanation of how tenants will be protected, including legal safeguards and assistance. The right to return policies must not only be communicated, but they should be documented. Tenants should be assured that they can come back to comparable or improved housing without losing their community ties, and addressing those fears proactively and will reinforce with firm commitments can go a long way. There's also a very empathetic approach that is necessary to handling some of those questions and concerns that might come from tenants. Last week, the city staff spoke about a handbook that was being developed and likely would be available publicly. I don't think there was a timeline that was provided, but think about it and in terms of that material is being provided, and yes, you can share the link with tenants, but sometimes you might also need to be able to walk a tenant through some of the aspects of that material that mean the most to them. And just that added support can help to reduce the fear, reduce the anxiety, but there's also a time commitment that is essential to be able to provide those supports. Addressing equity and power imbalances. This speaks to being transparent and consistent, deliver on every commitment, even the small ones. Sam talked about this a little bit before as well, but if you are unsure about being able to commit to something, do not say it. It is much better to say that you will take something back and follow up on it. But if you publicly commit to anything, even something small, the community will hold you accountable to that. And true equity is really about requiring the rebalancing of power dynamics, including working through trusted intermediaries such as churches or cultural centers, neighborhood nonprofits, and this again goes back to some of the research that you'll be doing about really getting to know the community that you're engaging in. Where are people eating? Where are people connecting? Where are people gathering? And making ties and partnerships with some of those agencies can help to partner you with the community as you continue on the process. For that tenant liaison, you do want to create a tenant liaison role, which is a human dedicated to regular updates, translation of information and fielding any of those concerns. You also want to tailor approaches to groups who are often excluded. This could be through using third-party facilitators to show neutrality. It could be compensating community members for their time. That could be through stipends or meals or transportation, childcare, depending on the needs of the members. But these efforts really help to recognize their lived experience as expertise. We talk about, you know, the architects and the planners and their roles in the expertise that they have. And we really need to give credit to our community members as well. Outreach should be multilingual, accessible to all people with disabilities, and sensitive to cultural norms. And this equity-centered engagement approach very much leads to better outcomes and stronger community trust. We'll emphasize the transparency again is in terms of the decision-making process, recognizing, yes, that things can change, but starting with the pre-application meeting and that collaboration with the city as early as possible to identify the requirements and timelines. Working with specialists to engage consultants who understand rental policies and tenant relocations, integrating the rental strategy with the planning process. So don't treat it as something separate or secondary, but it should be central to your development narrative. And trust can quickly erode if community members feel that their input is ignored. So that feedback loop is really, really pivotal. You want to communicate clearly how feedback has been incorporated into decisions. You said sort of we did format can help people see how their voices made a difference. And this is important even if the input that you receive cannot be adopted. But you have an opportunity to say, you know, we heard this, we did this, and this is why. Understanding that sometimes the feedback that you receive won't be something that can move forward with the redevelopment, but being transparent in terms of explaining and providing that education from your expertise in terms of why that can't be. This transparency as well continues to build that long-term trust and accountability across the project as it goes forward. So just a quick highlight of a case study. Lura was retained by Capital Developments to serve as the tenant liaison for a redevelopment at 88 Isabella Street in the Church Wellesley Village district. In this role, we acted on behalf of Capital Developments to work with rental tenants of 82 units in the building during the redevelopment application. And in this role, we provided a unique service in acting as that central point of contact, that tenant liaison regarding questions, comments, and concerns about the rental replacement process, and helped to provide clear and plain language information about tenants' rights under the Residential Tenancy Planning Act and policies within the official plan. We distributed notices and conducted door-to-door outreach with residents. We provided communication in plain language and maintained regular availability to contact our team through a dedicated email and phone line. We tracked comments and questions received from tenants and logged responses provided by the client, as well as communicated key issues back to the client and city planning and housing staff. We organized, facilitated, and reported on tenant meetings with the client and city staff, as well as assisted with property management with the resolutions of issues that would arise from tenants. The timing aspect that went into some of those activities varied, especially when it came to the door-to-door. Some tenants really needed more support. They hadn't moved before, they didn't understand the process. There might have been a language barrier, and we wanted to provide more of that empathetic and ongoing support approach, and other tenants knew that a change was coming and just wanted to be sort of updated on what the next steps would be. But we needed to be able to build in and adapt our approaches once we actually met with tenants and started to connect better. So between that project and some of our other project, a few of the challenges and how to navigate them that we have learned is to clarify tenants' rights as early as possible and communicate that existing tenants often have the right to return and what that might look like in each of their situations. Highlighting the community benefits through your communication materials. Yes, there will be some individuals or tenants who want to know exactly how this is going to impact them, but emphasizing the inclusion of new rental units, improved amenities, or even just that long-term affordability for the building as well as for the city as a whole is very helpful. And engaging, oops, I think I stopped sharing my screen. Sorry, just gonna get that back up. Everyone see my screen? Sorry about that, everyone. We're going back to our challenges, engaging early and sincerely. Whether or not that's the tenant meetings before any formal consultation happens, including interpreters or adapting the methods based on the participation that you'll have at those events can go a very long way. And I'll just go to my final slide here for some key takeaways. Begin engagement before plans are finalized, prioritize voices of those most at risk, build trust by being honest, responsive, and transparent. Community engagement shouldn't be seen as a burden, but it is an investment that will lead to more equitable, sustainable, and supported developments. And your redevelopment is not just about the building, but it is about preserving the soul of a community, and it is always about the people. With that, I will stop sharing my screen and turn it back to you, Nama.
Okay, so first of all, thank you so much for the very informative presentations. We are slightly over time, so I have one question for each of you that I think will be interesting for the majority of the audience. So the question for you, Sam, you mentioned like make sure that the person who talks to the media has been trained to speak to the media. What advice can you give to some, like we're not going to go back to university to get the proper training? What tools, courses, online, what advice can you give to those who are not super professionals but want to, gain the skill?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that there are resources out there if you look on YouTube or social media. The best advice that I would give that, I did myself when I was not at an agency, but I was working internally somewhere was I hired a PR firm to go through media training with our executive team. So I don't want this to be like a plug for Kaizen Partners, but it's something that like we do. A lot of PR agencies do it. It is they vary. Every agency does it a little bit differently. For us, it's like 3 hours, and we bring in lights, camera. We bring in a former journalist from the CBC who is there for the mock questions. It's like an hour of theory. So in your training, you should be looking at not just like tips and tricks for how to speak to media, but understanding what the role of the media is, what they're looking for out of their interview with you, how to kind of balance your relationship with the media. There should be there should be a theory portion all about your relationship and what you're hoping to achieve out of it and identified goals. And then there's the actual practice, which is mock interviews, watching out for verbal tics, movement tics. It's a whole thing. So it can be an actual like, half day experience. So I'm sure there are, I don't know any that I can point to like online or on LinkedIn, but reaching out to a PR firm for that is what I would advise.
And that was like, so I wrote down a few questions, but one of them was like, yeah, and that's kind of a build up to Zoe's question. I interviewed a few of my clients who went through rental replacement and developers who went through rental replacement process before this webinar, and I asked them, and one of the things was that media, and I have the same feeling every time that I pitch to the media. You need to not just find an angle; it needs to have some controversial perspective, right? And oftentimes it will be harder for the developer than the tenant. I'll just leave it there. But I just wanted to comment about what you said about the media's side and what they're trying to get out of it. And Zoe, when I interviewed developers, I've heard constantly from a lot of them that at the end of the day, majority of tenants, if they're informed and you are doing the developer, the owner does the right things, majority will understand, participate, be proactive. Like there will be a cooperation from their side. And then there's this 1%, right? That is the loudest and it's harder to crack. And any advice how to deal with the 1%, or you need to recognize that in life you can't make everyone happy and just move on?
I mean, yes, we're not in the game of trying to make everyone happy, but we do want to hear where they're coming from and what their perspectives are. The hardest thing is in a town hall format and having that 1% being the loudest. But what does help with that is if you are able to have any of those smaller discussions with tenant groups or even those who are associated with the ones with the perspectives which are maybe a little bit more negative towards the development before you do any of those public meetings. So you really start to understand where their concerns are and then you also have the time to figure out what the communication angle needs to be in terms of what the process is going to be going forward based on some of those concerns. So everything, there was a question in the Q&A as well, just in terms of, all of this looking like it's going to be very expensive. And it is an investment, but I would say the earlier on that you do it, the more information you have. And then if you need to scale back on engagement or communication, throughout the process at key milestones, then you have the ability to do that. But really, if you're aware of the 1% ahead of even starting, then you need to have conversations and engage with them early on to figure out what the best approach going forward.
And at least the way when I talk to my clients is like, just choose on the timeline when, like, are you going to hire them before the crisis or after the crisis, right?
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, it's going to be one of the two. Okay. It's 7 minutes to noon. Thank you so much, both of you. For those who I wasn't able to ask the questions, I'm sure Zoe and Sam will be, I don't know, speaking on their behalf, but maybe you can try and email them. Guys, thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and hopefully we made a difference. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.